Welcome to the CL Bryant Show. This is Mike Wood sitting in for CL tonight, and I've got Michelle in the studio with me. And Michelle, it's been an interesting weekend.
Interesting. This day has been interesting.
All kind of things happening in the news.
I know. And you know what happens every time you host this show?
What happens?
People tune in and they go, that's not CL? Who is that guy?
Who is that guy?
Why is he with that hokey accent? Why is he hosting
Where did he
that
come
show?
from?
That's right. Where'd they get him? At the corner?
Just
at
found
the
me
gas
out on the
station.
street.
That's right.
Well, it's always a pleasure, and I appreciate CL giving me the opportunity to sit in his chair. CL is with a Freedom Works event going on where? Somewhere in Texas, I understand?
Yes.
Well, good. Well, I always appreciate the time here and look forward to CL's return. Well, today we have all kind of things to talk about, and we're going to have Congressman Mike Johnson on in just a little bit and talk about what all is going on in Washington with the new Supreme Court appointee being confirmed today. And then later on we have Representative, I almost called him Art Carmody, Thomas Carmody, that will talk about the legislative session and a bill that he's got.
We've got former Navy SEAL Jonathan Gilliam's going to talk to us about Syria.
We got Jonathan, and he's always a great guest, and I enjoy talking to him. And a little action happening in Syria. What was that? I guess that was early Friday morning.
Yes, it was Thursday night, actually, in Eastern time, 9 o'clock. The president was sitting in Mar-a-Lago. But, it's been very interesting. But today you just had some breaking news about the Lovener in Alabama.
Yes, we have to give credit to Jay Watley, who came up with the term. But the governor of Alabama, who's been caught up in a sex scandal, was sending texts to his wife of 50 years that he meant to be sending to his mistress. And big mistake. And he is now going to step down. He was going to be impeached, but Governor Bentley of Alabama.
75 years old.
75 years old, a grandfather.
Just like you. As a matter of fact, you just turned 80, didn't you, this Saturday?
It feels like it, yes.
Well, it looks like it.
Yeah. 64. 64.
Yeah.
Will you still need me? Will you still feed me when I'm 64?
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
Good time.
yeah.
You didn't know you'd live this long.
No, I didn't.
Let alone have all your teeth and
I'd
be
have
able
taken
to
a lot
walk.
better care of myself if I'd have known I'd live this long. But anyway, I'm still here and kicking. But Governor Bentley is going to step down before he gets impeached, and of course the new justice of the Supreme Court that I can't wait to get Mike Johnson's reaction, because he's just another version of Mike Johnson, only a few years older.
At the Supreme Court level. And you and I have trouble pronouncing his name. You just want Mike to tell you how to pronounce. It's Gorsuch.
Gorsuch. Okay.
Yeah, we're practicing. We're practicing in here. But people, really, all joking aside, there is a very good reasons why we have you host the show. You're in the oil business. You're an oil driller for 100 years, so you're very knowledgeable about it. And obviously, this situation in the Middle East is affecting the price of oil, which does affect our listeners in Louisiana and Texas, because our economy in Louisiana is based on the price of oil.
No question, and the price of oil over there on Friday jumped almost $1. It jumped another $1 today. We actually closed futures over 53, which was the highest it's been in a while. And to put that in perspective, Michelle, last year at the beginning of the year, crude oil was $26 a barrel, and of course now futures are at 53. And the listening audience always wants to know, well, what's the price of gasoline going to do? Well, folks, it's going up. It always goes up every spring, because as driving increases, good old supply and demand kicks in, and so the prices go up. Plus we go to a summer blend that we've talked about before, which is more expensive to refine, and the price of crude now is almost, well.
And that's because of the unrest in the Middle East, because we've been importing that oil. A couple real quick questions. How is this going to affect domestic oil drilling?
Well, rig count has been climbing steadily. Once we went over
since Friday, or
no, since this year.
Since the president took over.
Since the president took over, and OPEC and Russia agreed to cut back on production. And so the domestic industry has stepped up to the plate, and each week rig counts continue to rise. We have, since the first of the year, increased domestic production by over 500,000 barrels a day, which is good news, for those of us in the energy industry. And as we go forward, hopefully prices will continue. A lot of people say, well, what do you need to make a living? I need it to be stable. I can make a living at any price, but I need stability. That's the key, because you can't plan to drill something that you think you're going to be getting $60 and you end up getting 20. So that's the big question mark.
Well, and I think too that listeners, like again in Louisiana, everybody has a saying here that we're all in the oil business, because every taxpayer, every citizen of Louisiana. But what about our listeners in North Carolina? I think what you've made very clear to us is that Americans need to be energy independent, that it's safe for all Americans. Maybe they don't see the an economic impact in North Carolina, but the ability to know that the Middle East can't hold oil hostage.
Well, they definitely see the impact in North Carolina on gasoline prices, because the majority of the gasoline that is used on the East Coast comes from the Middle East, and so if you should have a disruption of supply, and I know you're not old enough to remember
Absolutely not. I'm 25.
the Arab
unlike
oil embargo
yourself.
in '74, but in 1974, when the Arabs decided they weren't going to import crude oil to the U.S. anymore, I mean, gasoline became scarce. We had gas lines. You could only buy gasoline on even and odd days, and at the time I was going to school, University of Oklahoma, and driving
another oil capital of the world,
getting a degree in petroleum land management, and I was driving a 4-wheel drive vehicle that all of a sudden I couldn't get gas to go back and forth, so I had to
take your bicycle.
No, I had to get me one of them little Vegas, which was
a Vega.
Yeah,
oh, you are old.
It was.
Well, when we talk with Mike Johnson, he's also on the.
He serves on the Natural Resources Committee. He's also serves on Judiciary, so he will have some great input on the new Supreme Court justice, as
and
well
also
as
about the
what's happening in the Middle East.
Expect.
Yeah. So that's it's interesting times, and we had, of course, Palm Sunday yesterday, and the Coptic Christians in Egypt, 2 of their churches were bombed by ISIS. A continuing threat, and it's interesting as we talk about vetting refugees. Mm-hmm. The word out for the incident that happened in Sweden. He was there illegally. The incident that happened over the weekend in Sweden. So again, all of these things that President Trump continues to talk about, and people chastise him
and jest like about Sweden. Like, there's no trouble in Sweden.
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
Yeah, and then lo and behold,
and these things don't happen overnight. This person had been there.
Yes.
So.
But one of the most interesting things that happened over the weekend was even Senator McCain and Senator Lindsey both came out in support of the president. So, go figure.
And Hillary Clinton too. She's a Trump supporter now.
You never know. All right, we're coming up on a break. This is Mike Woods. We will be back in a minute. Welcome back to the CL Bryant Show. This is Mike Woods sitting in CL's chair. CL John, I know.
I
Look,
like that. That's new. I'm going to tell CL that.
I've been on allergy medicine. If you can't tell, I've got this Barry White
Plus,
impersonation
you just
going
turned
on.
80 on
Yeah, that's
Saturday.
right.
Happy birthday.
Getting old. But anyway, we have Congressman Mike Johnson, 4th Congressional District, State of the Louisiana. Michael, welcome to the show.
Hey, my brother. You're a little deeper than usual. That sounds good.
You have been
Well, there's a lot of bass on. He made us turn the bass up a lot.
Yeah.
He's trying to sound like Barry White.
It's all about the bass.
There you go.
That's right.
Well, you've had a busy weekend. I saw you at the Y grand opening on Saturday, and that was an exciting event. And then you've had town hall meetings today.
Yeah, I'm on my way to I think the 6th event of today. We started out early this morning in Sabine Parish with a town hall. We spoke at the Vernon Parish Chamber of Commerce luncheon, and we had a town hall just now in Oakdale down in southern part of the district, and now we're headed over. Where are we even going right now? We're Eunice. We're going to Eunice for an event in Eunice. I mean, it's been huge crowds, full houses at all these events, and it's gratifying to get out and see the people, see the constituents we represent, and hear their concerns. We want to be their voice in Washington, so this is an important part of the process.
Well, and a lot of people don't understand the 4th Congressional District goes from Caddo Parish all the way down the Sabine to Cameron Parish.
It goes down to Vernon, Beauregard, Allen, into Cajun country.
So you got a long way to go.
It's got a large square mileage. But there weren't any protesters there this time. As I know, back in January, there were a lot of protesters at town halls.
Maybe Soros is out of money.
That's right. Soros didn't pay anybody this week, I guess. Look, I mean, there was a good diversity of the crowds, a diversity of interests and philosophies and all that, but a great discussion. I mean, I think very productive, and anyone who attended any of these events would tell you that. Everybody was on their best behavior, and we talked about the issues and, how to reach consensus and solutions for our state, our district, and really the country at large. So a very productive dialogue, I thought.
Well, I appreciate what you're doing. I've commended you Saturday for your comment on the president's action in Syria. Why don't we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, Mike, it had to be done. I mean, for too long, Syria's barbaric actions have gone unanswered. And our previous president famously or infamously refused to put forward any comprehensive strategy. And the result was you had tens of thousands of innocent people who continue to die at the hands of this brutal dictator. I mean, he's a murderer. And Bashar al-Assad is ruthlessly gone after innocent civilians in his own country. And look, we had no choice. I mean, I went to a top secret, briefing with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, other top military brass from the Pentagon on Friday before I left Washington with other members of Congress. And suffice it to say, I mean, I can't get into the classified stuff, but suffice it to say, we hit exactly the right target at exactly the right time, and we had no choice in the matter. We had to do this. And I think, and I know you guys will probably agree, it's going to have the desired effect, because we have put Assad on notice, as well as every other little schoolyard bully and dictator across the world, that America's back, America's strong, and we're not going to tolerate this nonsense anymore.
Well, it was a swift, decisive action, and
yeah. And let me ask you. I mean, some people are comparing this to Hitler during World War II and how he treated the Jews. So many people spend so much time saying, well, that we would never let that happen again. But is there some similarity to the way that he's been able to just, do these things to his own people and us turn and look the other way?
Well, I guess that's a valid argument. I mean, look, President Obama famously, drew the supposed red line in the sand, and then they stepped right over it, and there was no retaliation, there was no action in response to that, and so that sent a very clear message to all the troublemakers around the world and dangerous terrorists and everybody else that America wasn't serious anymore. And that's a dangerous prospect for the whole globe, not just for the country, not just for the innocent civilians in Syria and around the region, but around the world. Ronald Reagan said, we maintain peace through our strength, and we have to project strength. America, we're not the world's policeman, but we are in so many ways, in so many cases, the arbiter of real justice and I'll put it in the clearest terms, of righteousness. I mean, this is a battle against good and evil. This guy is an evil dictator. He is killing innocent children, and that message had to be sent. I think it was sent clearly, and I'm delighted the president took the course of action that he did.
What is the mood in Washington on both sides of the aisle as a result of the action?
Well, I mean, this is one of those rare things that everybody seems to be in agreement on.
I mean, even Senator McCain and
Yeah.
Lindsey Graham came out.
And Hillary
Oh,
Clinton.
yeah.
I mean,
Exactly. I mean, across the board, because everybody recognizes, you can put politics aside on something like this. We recognize the stakes couldn't be any higher. We have these dangerous terrorists and dictators and ruthless people that have weapons of mass destruction, and we've got to send a message. We take out that arsenal. We blow up those airstrips where they're doing this. I mean, we know exactly where the plane took off. We know exactly where they dropped it and where the plane returned, and we hit that spot. And it had to be done. And if every citizen was privy to all the confidential information and classified info, there'd be no doubt in anybody's mind that we did the right thing.
They would all agree. Let's talk about a new Supreme Court justice. I let Ed on the show today. I said if Mike Johnson could have handpicked someone, this would have been the guy he'd have picked, because it's just you about 20 years later.
Actually, he's only 5 years older than me.
Oh, you're kidding.
Neil Gordy.
yeah, but Mike's got a good plastic surgeon.
Well, he's got more gray hair than me, but that's the exciting thing about it, Mike. I mean, aside from his ideology and the fact that he is a true constitutional conservative, I mean, this is an all-star pick by any measure. And he's 49 years old, so I mean, he could be on the bench for another 30 or 40 years if God allows it. So, I mean, I think it's a huge moment for the country that he has taken his post today on the U.S. Supreme Court. And look, the longest-lasting legacy of any president is who he puts on the federal court.
No question.
We've talked about that before. And this was a good one. It's going to have reverberation for many, many years to come.
Well, during the entire lead up to the election, that's what we kept saying here on the show was, regardless of any of your political beliefs, the most important thing is who's going to get on the Supreme Court. And Hillary could have done us in for the rest of our lives.
Oh,
That's
Lord,
why we're
there's no
cheering in
doubt
the
about
streets today, and they're crying in their beer, but that's okay. And it was about a year ago that Justice Scalia, a little over a year ago, that he passed away. So it's taken this much time, and it just happened just in a day, and now it's done, and we're moving on.
And it's going to be interesting as we go forward, too, to see what, with the Democrats doing what they did. I think they played their trump card a little too early. No pun intended.
I think you're right, and the outrage about it is that Chuck Schumer and the Democrats in the Senate are playing politics with this, and it's just they're so disingenuous about it, you guys. I mean,
what a surprise, Mike. We're coming up on a break. Let's take a quick break,
okay.
And we'll be back with
Sure.
Congressman Mike Johnson, 4th Congressional District. This is Mike Woods. We'll be back in a minute. Welcome back to the C.L. Bryant Show. This is Mike Wood sitting in for C.L. Bryant. I've got Michelle in the studio, and we have Congressman Mike Johnson, 4th Congressional District, state of Louisiana, on the phone. And we're talking about the upcoming Supreme Court session. What, we have 2 more weeks, I believe, they sit in on the court?
Yeah, that's right. I think that's right. And he takes the seat today, and he'll be able to hear a few more oral arguments. He won't. The rules don't allow him to rule on the cases that are already on the docket where they've already had oral argument. But going forward and henceforth, Justice Gorsuch will be part of that analysis. And now we have nine seats filled, and the big anticipation is, Mike, what happens next? So, we've got a couple of justices that have been talking about retiring for a long time. We've got a couple that are in poor health, and the next seat will be the all-out. That'll decide the future of the court for a generation.
What all is going to happen with the Susan Rice debacle?
That's a very good question. I think clearly, so far as we know now, the evidence points to it pretty clearly that she is in the wrong. Let's put it that way.
Well, and when the Washington Post gives her 4 Pinocchios for lying, that's
right.
That's pretty strong.
Right. She was not the most trustworthy source to begin with, and I think clearly she violated several protocols and probably directly violated, federal statutes. So, look, we're going to let the investigation process play out. The intelligence committees and their investigations will go forward. We'll trust, the FBI and those involved in this to do their job, and then we'll see where the evidence leads. You
made the comment at the Y opening over the weekend with the lady from BHP Billiton being there of your service on Natural Resources Committee. What's going through Congress right now that has an impact on those of us in the oil and gas business in Louisiana and elsewhere?
Yeah, it's a great question, Mike. Everybody knows that when Donald Trump was on the campaign trail, he spoke often and with great fervor about rolling back this regulatory environment that we're in. And it's been a real problem, particularly over the last 8 years in the Obama administration. There's really been a fourth branch of government. It's been the bureaucracy, and the EPA and the Department of Interior and all these agencies. They've just put this labyrinth of complex regulations on top of the industries, and always at the center of the target has been oil and gas in our industry. And so, look, we all believe in some reasonable level of regulations to protect everyone, but it's such a hyper-regulatory environment now that's just gotten out of control. So we've already begun rolling that back. We began literally the day we took our oath of office in January. We already had some bills on the floor that we passed, and that's going to be a continuing effort. The Trump administration is serious about it. The cabinet, all the officials in charge are serious about it. And in the Natural Resources Committee and in the Oversight Committee there, the subcommittee that I'm vice chair of, we're going to go after these burdensome regulations and begin to dial that back. And I think it's going to allow the market to flourish again, allow the industry to do what it does best.
Well, it's so exciting to me, Mike, to see the people that the president has surrounded himself with. And for the first time in my lifetime, I think we have a very pro-business cabinet. His appointees all have been successful businessmen and women. And you're exactly right. Right before Obama gave up office, we got a letter as an oil and gas operator that we were going to have to start monitoring methane emissions on all of our locations. That would have cost me about $100,000 a year per well, per location, which would have basically put the majority of my production as non-economic. So one of the first things, I was so excited when the president was elected because I got a letter from the EPA said, please ignore that. We're not going to do that anymore.
You should be getting a lot more of those letters in the near future, Mike, and we're working on that. And you're right. I think the people that the president has put in place, I think it's the best group of professionals. Maybe it might be the best cabinet since Eisenhower, and we're expecting great things from them. And they're going to have lots of willing accomplices in the Congress. I promise you that. So we're going to get this thing done, and we're going to roll back the regulations and enhance the free market again.
Thank you.
A lot of people have called, since the last time you were on the show, talking about the situation with the repealer in place. For about a minute, do you have anything to say about the future of that? Is there going to be some more looking at that? The constituents that we're seeing here are interested in doing something about it.
Well, so am I, Michelle. And we did a big press conference on Thursday before we left Washington. I was so glad to stand with other House Republican leaders from across the spectrum. We announced the good news that we're making real progress. on a final health care bill. I am one of about 3 members of Congress who've been working behind the scenes between the White House, the Freedom Caucus, my conservative brothers and sisters there with leadership, getting all the parties together on some amendments that will actually drive down the cost of health care. That's what we were concerned about in the first version of the bill. It actually made premiums go up continually instead of down. And so I don't want to get too deep in the weeds because we don't have time, but basically we've got an amendment that's going to help us drive down costs. And in a short summary, we're going to take a model that was developed in the state of Maine, where they have a high-risk pool for the 5% of the population that has the highest cost of health care, cancer patients and chronic illnesses. And when you put them in a separate pool that's subsidized by the state, the premiums for 95% of the rest of everyone else go down dramatically. And so that will be the solution, I think, that gets everybody on board. I expect we're going to get the bill passed pretty soon after we get back, after this break, about a week and a half. Send it to the Senate. They'll tinker with it. It'll get to the president, and it'll be signed into law. And the next thing up will be tax reform.
Well, and people need to realize that's what you're there to do. I mean, you've only been there a few months, and this has been law for 8 years. I mean, it takes time to go through things, process them, discuss them. And you all were working, and I think the media shaped the conversation very differently than it was. You all were working and trying to find the best solutions, but they tried to paint a whole different story. So we're proud of you, and we trust that you have our backs.
Well, thank you, Michelle. And you're right. I mean, there was a lot of work going on behind the scenes. On the day that the bill was pulled, up to about 20 minutes prior to that time, I literally was running between the Freedom Caucus leadership and working with the White House. I spent 3 hours with the president that day, 3 hours trying to negotiate to get us to a bill that everybody could be yes on that would actually solve the problem. So a lot of good work's gone into it. I think the end result will be an even better product, and we're going to fix this thing.
Mike, we got 1 minute, and I wanted to quickly touch on your bill that you just introduced, the Protection Against Child Exploitation Act.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. It's H.R. 1761. It's just a bill, in a very simple summary, to close a gap in the current law that leaves the most innocent victims vulnerable. It's a court-created loophole in the law. We've got to fix it. We're going to protect children. I think it's the first job of the government is to defend the defenseless, and I think it'll pass with a broad bipartisan majority.
I love a man that quotes Romans 13. Mike Johnson, Congressman, 4th District, State of Louisiana. This is Mike Wood sitting in for the C.L. Bryant Show. Thank you, Michael. Look forward to having you on the show again.
Broadcasting from the Bayou State and all around the Gulf Coast and streaming nationwide. This is The C.L. Bryant Show.
Welcome back to the C.L. Bryant Show. This is Mike Wood sitting in for C.L., and I've got Michelle in the studio. And Michelle, the day has been full of all sorts of news. One of the interesting items that I came across came out of the great state of New York.
Are you saying that facetiously? Yes. We have listeners in New York, Mike.
Oh,
Take
I'm sorry.
That back.
That's right. In fact, our next guest is from
there.
Manhattan. Yeah, sorry about that,
born
Jonathan.
There.
I know it.
Yeah,
that's
there
why
we go.
That's why I gave you the dig. But anyway, your governor Cuomo has come up with an idea to allow free college tuition for any student whose parents are considered middle class, and you'll appreciate this. The definition of someone in the middle class in New York is less than $125,000 a year income. But anyway, his proposal is that if you receive this free tuition, you are required to stay in the state of New York for as many years as you receive the tuition. So if you take 4 years to go through college, you are required to spend 4 years after you graduate living in New York. And if you don't, then you have to pay it back.
Well, and that's interesting. Higher education is something that you are very involved with.
Actually, I spent Thursday and Friday in the classroom at LSU Shreveport, and I will be the business executive and resident of the business school at LSU Shreveport starting next fall, teaching a class in oil and gas law.
Well, you've also been on
served on the University of Louisiana System Board of Supervisors, served on Centenary College Board of Trustees, and recently have been appointed to the Southern Association of College and Schools Board of Trustees, which deals with accreditation.
And yet you still talk with that accent.
That's
Maybe somebody could teach you how to speak there, boy.
It's just the way I was raised.
Yeah, I could tell. So, people are looking in the state of Louisiana at the TOPS program, which is the acronym that we call it. It's incentive to keep your students in your state. That's a great idea because I know back before TOPS, I had very young children. Your children were not as young as mine because you're very old, but they all left. So you have the best minds because we do produce some incredible students in Louisiana, but they were all leaving the state. Now TOPS, has had some financial troubles. But the things that are being proposed are sensible. Whether we have financial trouble with TOPS or not, you should still look at the graduation rate because you're a dad, I'm a mom, we have kids in college and out of college, and the child needs to take it seriously. The parent can pay for it, but the child has to take it seriously. So there's nothing wrong with having, in the case of TOPS, making sure that the students are incentivized to graduate. But in the case of New York, don't you think they've taken it a little bit too far?
Well, I do, and one of the questions being raised is, it's great to say you'll educate me, but if there's not a job here in New York when I graduate, then what good does it do? And
but what about the schools? I mean, how much is that tuition? Is that tuition going to skyrocket now? Is where
we've seen that it has in Louisiana.
Well, the free market situation, which is something you can address right now. How do they keep the cost from going? Oh, you mean there's unlimited purse strings, or is the government, basically the state, going to say no? We're putting a cap on it. It can't be more than that.
Well, it's a double-edged sword, and what has happened in Louisiana because of TOPS, as state support has declined. In 2008, the state of Louisiana supported colleges and universities to the tune of about 70% of the total budget. The other 30% came from self-generated revenues, tuition. That's now reversed. Today, the state only contributes 30% of the total part of the pie, and the other 70% comes from tuition. And guess what? Tuition has, as I told my class on Friday, I said when I went to LSU Shreveport, my tuition was $75 a semester.
Yes, but they also had horse and buggy
That's
and
right.
no paved roads.
That's right. But as any time you get, whether it's college education, whether it's government health care, whatever, when you get the government involved and they start spending, people don't consider it to be their money that's being spent, and they really don't care what the cost is until all of a sudden the government isn't spending anymore, and then you hear all the hollering and screaming. So it's going to be...
But the solutions are going to be a combination of public-private. Those two words, you hear them all the time, but the solutions for healthcare is going to be the same thing because the reports came out in Louisiana, for example, with healthcare, that since we privatized things and got out of the healthcare business, there's been a cost savings Do you think that that's true?
Oh, there's no question. And we found out early on in higher ed. We were trying to run bookstores at our colleges and universities. Well, guess what? Barnes and Noble could do a lot better job running the bookstore than we did. So we privatized all the bookstores.
And so what they do is they give you a percentage of their sales. It
cut-
always makes sense in business to do that.
And guess what? They don't have near the employees. You don't have civil service. You don't have all the issues. We then looked at privatizing the cleaning. And guess what? They would clean a lot more for a lot less. I mean, so yeah, there's no question there are some savings to be involved in privatization. And I think as we go forward, you're going to see, well, look at University of Virginia. They basically have privatized their college because they realized it was costing them more to get state support than what they were, McNeese, guess what? McNeese gives back
in Louisiana.
In Lake Charles. McNeese gives back to the state every year more than they receive from the state. So why should they be a state institution other than the fact that they're in state buildings and on state property? But
well, I think for me, the simpleton that I am, when I think about state-run businesses, I think of the post office. And then I immediately know, but the post office is doing something very cool now where they're scanning your mail, which they do every night. I really love this idea. So the mail is being scanned, and you can get an email in the morning to show you what's going to be in your mailbox that afternoon. And it doesn't cost a lot of money to do that because it's already being scanned.
Well, they have machines that are processing all the mail anyway.
So it's like, but the thing is, being ahead of things means you would have done this 10 years ago. And the fact that it took this long to do it, and the only reason they're doing it is the pressure from these private mail
UPS
entities.
and FedEx,
exactly.
yes, has put the pressure on that.
So that's why, it's a combination. Nobody here thinks that we should crush human beings to make a profit. That doesn't make you a good Republican. But on the other hand, you really have to be skeptical about the state getting involved in things. And Bernie Sanders, New York, they were begging for this. Let's see how this works. Do you think it's going to pass? And now the governor proposed it, but what about their legislature?
That's going to be a good question to see if it does. Well, this article said it's done.
Well, we'll see how this kind of pans out and see if I can't. The best thing is let them try this and then let them see that it doesn't work. Just like welfare hasn't worked since the 1960s.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see does it truly keep. One of the big pushes for TOPS here is that it would keep our students in Louisiana at least through college, and we were losing them right and left. And the reason we were losing them is because adjacent states were subsidizing higher ed institutions at a higher rate than it's cheaper to send your child to UT Tyler as a Shreveport resident than it is to send him to LSU Shreveport. And so that's we've lost students to Alabama, to Mississippi, to Texas schools because their states are funding higher ed at a higher rate than we are here in Louisiana. So it's going to be interesting to see.
And so how much is the price of the barrel today?
Price of crude oil, just a few seconds ago I looked, was $53.15, which is more than double what it was a year ago at this time.
And our budget is predicated on a $30, the Louisiana
state budget is predicated on $30 crude oil, and for every dollar over that, that's an additional $12 million in revenue. So I'm not smart enough to multiply 12 times 23, but whatever that number is, it's about 65 million, something like that, additional revenue that is not budgeted. So that'll be one of the few good stories as we start the legislative session today, and we're going to have State Rep Tom Carmody on the phone at 7 o'clock. But when we come back after the break, we have Jonathan Gillum, who is host of Experts on Facebook Live, former Navy SEAL. We're going to talk about Syria. This is Mike Woods sitting in for the CL Bryant Show. Welcome back to the CL Bryant Show. This is Mike Woods, and in the studio with Michelle. This is the CL Bryant Show. CL is traveling. He is in Texas, but we'll be back later in the week. We have on the phone Jonathan Gillum, a friend of the show who I have visited with a few times, former Navy SEAL, host of Experts on Facebook Live. Jonathan, welcome to the show. Jonathan?
Yes, sir.
Welcome to the CL Bryant Show.
You got it, my friend.
Tell me a little about, you and I have visited before, but some of our audience are not familiar with you. Tell us a little bit about your military background as we lead into this discussion on Syria.
Well, I'll tell you, I served as a Navy SEAL officer. So, as in the military, your primary job as an officer is to be an officer. So I didn't mesh so well there, but was a great operator and loved to operate. And as a SEAL, you're working in and out of these countries. A lot of the time, you're there on behest of the ambassador, actually, where you're doing what's called foreign internal defense. And reality is that's what I did the majority of time I was in. That's the majority of things that we actually did before we went to war. And that just entails training other nations and their special forces. And you hear this term, advisors in country, and that's what we pretty much are. So we really do get a good view not only of what other countries and their military forces are capable of, but we also understand the politics because we play that game with the ambassadors in every country that we go in.
What did you think of the president's actions last week?
In Syria.
But I'll tell you, honestly, I love the fact that he did what he did. What bothers me is if that's all that he does, then we've just gone back down the road of the past 16 years. And we have to get to a point in this country where when there's a problem, we solve that problem. And throwing Tomahawk missiles at something, if you're softening up the target for future attacks, that's one thing. But if you're looking for a solution or a message, bombing an airfield is not how you do it when you're trying to send that message to a psychopath.
Well, it was interesting today in reading some of the articles, and so far, mostly everything that I've read, everybody's been extremely positive in supporting the president, including Senator McCain and Lindsey Graham and others. But of course, then I'm reading that you do know that it cost $1.5 million for every Tomahawk missile that they shot. So was it really worth the $90 million we spent? I mean, that's I don't know.
Well, that's a good question for you, Jonathan. I mean, that method of using those missiles, we just talked to our local congressman who said he was proud of it because he felt like it destroyed the very airfield that those planes were taking off. But what do you think about that? Like, not the next step, but as far as the first step, how do you feel about this being a good first step?
Well, tactically, I don't know how big of a deal it was in destroying those airfields because they can take off from, there's other airfields. But I think what you just pointed out there, in that it has united a whole lot of people that wouldn't have been united before. That's probably the most important thing that this did, that they showed they can react to an enemy and people can be unified about that action. So,
and that's good, considering that.
My problem is that John McCain is on board with it, and I'm not a big John McCain fan.
Right.
So, it's interesting.
Well, and the other story that I was reading said that he is now, because of his response toward the Russians and sending Secretary Tillerson over there right now with some strong words, that they've now taken the Russian card out of the left's hands, that they can't beat Trump over the head with that. So what do you think about his response to the Russians?
Well, I really like Tillerson, and I really like the way, out of all the people that work in the president's cabinet, I like the way Tillerson and the president interact with each other, and they both come off as very senior, calm individuals, and that I like that. I think that's exactly what we need when we're dealing with somebody as elusive and somebody like Putin who is willing to do action. So I think, tactically, as far as airfield, I don't know, but tactically, as far as negotiations and putting force behind our diplomacy, I think it's a good thing. I just don't want it to be the only thing, because that's in the end, we'll end up proving that this president's not going to do anything different than the last administration.
Well, let me ask you this about Tillerson, though, and both of you, because Mike is in the oil business. Tillerson doesn't have a military background, does he? I mean, here he is, our Secretary of State, being very bold, and all he is a CEO of a company, and it kind of teaches you something about our president.
It's a pretty big company, though.
Yeah,
it's like a small country or a big country.
Yeah, he's a Texan, and he's led a very giant company and it really does play a central role in the goings on in a lot of these countries that we're dealing with financially. So, I think he's a good choice for this, and he's shown already that when he walks in their room, he's got command presence.
And let's shift gears a little bit and go to North Korea and South Korea. We're currently having military exercises in South Korea. We're dispatching part of our naval fleet over there, and we're dealing with a crazy man in North Korea. What's going to happen in that part of the world?
It's interesting because the environment that we're in now in politics is that we don't know what's going to happen, even with President Trump, because there's so many politicians involved, not only here, but in South Korea, in China, in Japan. There's all these different elements of politics there, and none of it really is concentrated on what's effective. I mean, what's effective is we should have taken this guy out, how many years ago when his dad was in charge and ruined that and killed that regime. But we don't, the same thing with Syria. The American people don't realize, and they're not shown, what the reality is of these wars, of the leaders in these countries, and what the motivation is. Syria, not to go back to Syria, but I mean, after talking earlier, I went back and started going over Syria, make sure in case some of the questions about how it runs.
Well, Mike had those questions. We were going to get to the Sunnis and the Shias, but we really want, like, even in North Korea, give us like what you think would be a next step there.
I mean, I don't understand why the world doesn't get together. Like we learned the lesson when it came to Hitler, that you can't allow these madmen to exist. I mean, there's a difference between a dictator like Saddam Hussein or Gaddafi, who relatively kept their region running smooth, and somebody like the leaders of Iran or the leaders of North Korea, who are bent on war. And I don't know why the world doesn't respond to this appropriately. In my mind, the appropriate response is full force attack, where you take out their ability to launch missiles and you kill the regime.
And it looks like right now everybody's looking to China to solve the problem, and China hadn't solved the problem in the last 40 years.
Well, see, and this goes back to the other thing of if you have diplomacy without force that backs it up, nobody's going to listen to you. And for, relatively speaking, for the latter part of George Bush's tenure, and also for the entire time of Obama, there was no force to back up your diplomacy.
Where's Teddy Roosevelt when you need him?
Exactly. Where's the generals when you need them?
Jonathan, we're going to keep you through the break. We're coming up on a break, and we will be back with Jonathan Gilliam.
Learn more about the Syria, the Sunnis, and the Shias.
The Shias, that's right. This is Mike Wood sitting in for C.L. Bryant. We'll be back after the break. Welcome back to the CL Bryant Show. This is Mike Wood sitting in for CL Bryant. I've got Michelle in the studio, and we're on the phone with Jonathan Gillum, former Navy SEAL. As we went into the break, we were talking a little bit about what was happening in Syria. And Jonathan, you're going to enlighten us a little bit about the Shias and the Sunnis?
Well, yeah, I can enlighten you as much as it's possible. I mean, there's basically, in a nutshell, here's what everybody needs to realize. The Sunni-Shia split happened in 632 A.D., a little bit after that, and after Muhammad died, and there was his son-in-law took over, and his sons were later killed, and the son-in-law was overthrown. And that's right around the time when this split came. I think the most important thing to remember here is that now the Sunnis make up the majority. Over 1.6 billion Muslims in the world are Sunni. And what you have to realize is that they believe their authority comes straight down through the lineage of Muhammad. With the Shias, they believe that it's more of a top-down approach where God's word comes through spiritual guides such as imams and descendants of Muhammad's sons. So the whole
the
thing
Sunnis
so
would be like ISIS are Sunnis. Majority of the American Muslims are Sunnis. Is that the case? Saudi Arabia?
Well, the majority, and this is where, again, it gets as confusing as Syria itself is. Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Sudan, and Syria, the majority of Syrians are actually Sunni. Al-Qaeda is Sunni. But when you look at the majority of ISIS members, for instance, they too are Syrian, although when it comes to Syria, they side a little bit more on the Shia side because Assad himself is actually Shia, along with Iran, Pakistan, India, Iraq, majority of people in Iraq.
And what about, so Iran is Shia?
Iran is Sunni.
Is Sunni, okay.
But I'm
sorry. Iran is Shia.
Shia, yeah. And a lot of the alliances in the Middle East, I mean, why did Saudi Arabia go to war with Yemen? It's all Sunni versus Shia. I mean, they're all Muslim, but if you aren't the right kind of Muslim, it's like
But we have that in the United States with Christians. We have different sects, different denominations. It's just that we don't use violence. But in Ireland, you had
the Catholics and the Protestants killing each other.
So it's very similar to this, and we need to try to understand it because the world is a smaller place in 2017. And so when we say these generic terms, and this is what bothers me, Jonathan, the mainstream media doesn't get to the meat of things and confuses the American people. This needs to be explained to people so they understand why it is not that simple to remove this dictator, or why he is, because he doesn't see them as his own people, basically.
Well, no, you're absolutely right. And so basically what we look at, sorry, I just had kids walk up to me. This is new streets in New York, so that's what happens.
Yeah, well, you look like a superhero and a giant as a Navy SEAL and FBI agent, unlike Mike Woods, who just looks old.
And tired.
Yeah. People in New York would just get an ambulance for him in a wheelchair.
Well, so here's the thing. You're absolutely right that the mainstream media, they don't, not only do they not explain it, they don't know it the majority of the time when you talk to them. And I don't expect the American people to just rush out and know it too. In fact, especially when it comes to what's going on in Syria, here's really what you need to understand. The Islamic community is in bad shape, and there has always been war within that community. It doesn't matter if it's Shia or Sunni. They're all fighting in Syria, and they're all fighting for different reasons. Russia's there for political and power reasons because of the ports and economic reasons of trade. And Iran and Assad and the United States and all these different allies are in there as well because they have stakes in certain things. But when it comes right down to it, and after we had our conversation, Michelle, I went back and I was looking at this, and you know what came out of it is the fact that the world will never name its enemy. The United States doesn't name its enemy. The enemy is not radical Islam. The enemy is fundamental Islam. And everywhere it goes and settles in the world, there is war. And Syria has all of them, has all the different sects, and has all the different problems. And here's the interesting thing about Syria. It reminds me of Cartagena, Colombia, when I was down there in the height of the all the drugs and the cartels. And Cartagena is where the DEA and the FARC and the narcos, everybody would go there and kind of lay down their arms and be there. Well, Syria is where all the Islamic factions go to war. And we would be better off going through there and doing what we did in Fallujah, where we tell everybody, if you're a woman or a child, get out. If you're a man and you're not a part of this fight, get down. Because we're coming through and we clear every single one of them out. And I know that sounds over the top, but that's the only way you're ever going to fix this.
Well, I think you know about war. I mean, I wouldn't know what to do, but that's what I was going to ask you at the close of this segment, is to give us a solution to this. I mean, I think you said something about fundamentalism and fundamental Islam, because then they're fighting with each other. That's what causes them to, try to kill other people that we think are the same religion. They don't think they're following it as strictly as they should, so they're infidels. But you think there is a solution, and you're talking about a ground war. Is that what you're saying?
A ground war where we don't stop. We did this in the beginning of the Iraq War, at the beginning of the Kuwait War. We stop. We go in, we do this massive attack, and then we stop. Very few Americans get killed, and we do amazing work. And then we stop. And, when you look back at World War II and you look at how we dealt with that whole situation, we didn't stop until the situation was solved. And if we keep fighting by Tomahawk missiles and by special forces here and there, we're going to still be in war in 16 years, just like we're in war now.
So you're saying to get all in, because when you read about World War II, sometimes it took 2 years to win battles and 26,000 American casualties. And I'm not a person who likes violence or even guns, but you're saying we have to make a commitment to stabilize the situation. And do you think there is a way to do that?
Yeah, it's called commitment. You said the word. You commit to the fight. Syria is a battleground. Syria is not a war. The war is with fundamental Islam and pushing them back to manageable numbers, where the Muslims who don't want to be in war can live in peace, and where the rest of the world doesn't have to worry about this virus. And if we don't commit to a fight, then the fight is going to continuously commit to harassing us.
And you're exactly right. We're going to be in it forever and ever. Jonathan, I hate to stop you. We're coming up on a break. Jonathan Gillum, former Navy SEAL, appreciate your service to our country, my friend. Appreciate your time on the show. This is Mike Wood sitting in for C.L. Bryant. Thank you. Welcome back to the C.L. Bryant Show. This is Mike Wood sitting in the chair for C.L. Bryant. I've got Michelle in the studio, and we have Tyler Bridges on the phone. Tyler is a newspaper reporter and noted author from Baton Rouge. Recent book, Long Shot. In fact, Tyler, I believe the last time you were on, you were up here doing a book signing.
Yes, I was in December that Long Shot out and had a nice time up in Shreveport area.
Well, we started the legislative session today, and you had an interesting article on the House leadership. What happened in Baton Rouge today?
Well, as you mentioned, Mike, today was the opening session of the 60-day regular session, and per custom, the governor gave an opening address, spoke for about 40 minutes, highlighted his initiatives during the session. He wants to make changes in the way for sentencing for nonviolent offenders to reduce Louisiana's incarceration rate, which is
we're number one
to be the highest, not just in the country but in the world. And he also wants to tackle the opioid abuse, and he particularly wants to make changes in the state tax system, which is actually a subject I've been writing a lot about lately.
What's going to happen? And I had a luncheon with a few state legislators earlier in the week, and my charge to them was we just simply can't go to Baton Rouge and always vote no. We've got to come up with a plan. What's going to happen? Are we just going to have another knockdown, drag-out fight?
Well, it's too early to know what will happen. The governor has put forth a comprehensive tax plan, and the big issue facing the governor is that $1.3 billion in temporary taxes are falling off next year. Here in Baton Rouge, it's called a fiscal cliff. So the legislature has to make up that money either through spending cuts or raising other taxes, and the governor has put forth something called a commercial activities tax. Instead of taxing profits, you tax sales of corporations as a way of making up for a penny that will be rolling off of the sales tax next year. But that plan is not getting much support. The governor today challenged legislators, basically saying, Republicans particularly, and in the House, saying, if you don't like my ideas, please let me know what you want to do in ways to cut spending and to make up that lost revenue. I wrote a story a week ago, Mike, that laid out that the governor's put forth a comprehensive plan, and the Republicans had said they wanted to do tax reform, but they don't seem to be showing any interest, or at least they haven't showed it so far this year.
Well, what about the price of oil and gas? Mike's in the oil industry, so he's always our expert on that. We have a budget that was based on $30 a barrel, and now today he just checks. He checks every few minutes. It's $53 and something cents. So that's $250 million. But of course that's you then prorated it because we're already in April and the fiscal year end. So it's not going. We're going to have a little bit of a surplus. We're not going to have the shortfall that we have in the past, but it's not near enough to make up the $1 billion that we lose when we give up the temporary 1 cent sales tax. But yeah, so far everything I'm seeing, and of course it's a lot as a result of your writing in Baton Rouge. It doesn't look like it's going anywhere. I mean, and I thought for a while there we even had a shot at the gasoline tax increase, which we've not increased, I believe, since '93. And of course, people are getting better mileage, and so we need to put money back into our infrastructure, and that looks like it's going nowhere. Well, even Democrats are not supporting that. I've noticed locally Cedric Lover is not supporting that. I haven't seen anybody that's for that gas tax. I'm surprised you're for it, Mike Woods.
Well, I'm not necessarily for it. I would have no problem in supporting it if I knew that the monies were going to go to the roads, and that's what has happened in the past. And a lot of the criticism is, look, these monies were dedicated for bridges and roads, but they've been spent elsewhere, and that's why we don't have the necessary revenue.
And that's not a problem that seems to be fixed. I mean, Tyler, what do you think about that? People thinking that there's not enough oversight and control. The legislature says we're going to do X, but they don't end up doing it. I mean, what do you think about that?
Well, I don't have a personal opinion. I'll tell you, in Baton Rouge, given the traffic, particularly here, and I know it's a problem in other parts of the state, but boy, it's really traffic is a problem in Baton Rouge, and the governor has said that he doesn't see any way to solve this other than more revenue to spend building more roads. So he's a task force that he convened recommended an increase in the gas tax. So he's waiting to see what the legislature is going to do on that.
Well, what about people talking about we have too many expenses? Are you seeing, and and Treasurer Kennedy, when he was state treasurer, said, "Oh, we've got it to reduce some of these." And we're going to talk to Thomas Carmody about that in a little while because he's recommending something specific. But what do you think about that? Do you think that there are obvious things that can be cut, or why is it always go straight to raising taxes?
Well, I don't think actually it always does go straight to raising taxes. Remember the previous governor, Bobby Jindal, he in the legislature made a lot of cuts in spending, and in the first year of John Bell Edwards, there was also a lot of cuts. I think the governor's point is, sure, we can make some more cuts, but Republicans, if you really don't want to raise any new revenue, tell me where the cuts need to be, because Republicans, particularly in the House, keep talking about the need for structural budget reform. So again, the governor's point that he outlined today is, all right, so what are your plans? And so far we haven't seen them yet from Republicans.
And I've had the same discussion, Tyler. I've got a background in higher ed, and they keep saying, well, the schools are spending too much money. I said, well, you're the ones that created them, so tell us which ones you want us to close. And, of course, nobody wants to do that.
Well, what about the cigarette tax? I mean, is there anybody talking about that?
A cigarette tax?
Yes.
Well, they raised that last year, and they did that in 2015 as well. Probably that you can only go to that so many times. And I'll make the point also that the legislature last year created a task force to study the entire state tax system, and that 13-member panel spent 2016 studying the tax system. They came up with a number of recommendations in January. The governor has embraced those recommendations. The task force said that the current tax system is broken and needs to be dramatically changed. The governor wants to make it. It doesn't look like we're certainly not hearing much support of that from the Republicans. But again, we're not hearing what kind of tax system they do want to see. Be saying no at this point.
Well, it's going to be interesting. Tyler, we're coming up on a break, and we want
where can people pick up your book? Tell them real quick.
Yeah, LouisianaLongshot.com is the site that myself and my co-author Jeremy Alford have, or people can get it at Amazon.com, or they can also get Longshot at Barnes & Noble.
Great. Tyler Bridges, we appreciate you being on the show, author of Longshot and other great books, and writer for the Baton Rouge Advocate. Tyler, thank you, my friend.
Thank you both. Appreciate it.
So it creeps into this house.
Welcome back to the CL Bryant Show. This is Mike Wood sitting in the studio with Michelle.
And we are just taking care of business.
Taking care of business. Bachman Turner Overdrive.
Well, we've got a lot of business to take care of. So let's talk about Jonathan Gillum. We got some phone calls. How can they hear and listen to Jonathan Gillum? Facebook Live. What's the name of the show?
Experts.
EXPERTS. Jonathan T. Gillum on Facebook Live. Just look him up. And we'll post something we always do. I always do post things on our Facebook page. Jonathan T. Gillum, the experts. He really is an expert on foreign policy. And then Tyler Bridges. They can go to The Advocate and online. You don't even have to subscribe anymore the old-fashioned way. You can get it online, and you can follow Tyler's editorial and his journalism. He is an acclaimed, award-winning journalist. Not just from Baton Rouge, but he's lived around the world. He was at the Miami Herald. He went to Stanford. He went to Harvard. And now he is here trying to make sense of what is the Louisiana Capitol.
And if you've never been through a legislative session, you need to look at The Advocate, because it is interesting times in Baton Rouge. I believe we have a caller, don't we, Michelle?
We have Tom Pace on the line. Tom, you wanted to make a comment.
Yes, I did. Mike, it's so good, and thank you for taking my call.
Glad to have you.
We all know a good friend of ours named Ernest Palmisano Jr., the man that runs Ernest Orleans Restaurant.
Best crab claws in town.
Best crab claws in town, and right now, he's normally open on Tuesday, but it'll be closed tomorrow simply because his mama, Miss Margie Palmisano, who would have turned, believe it or not, her birthday was today. She would have turned 89. She passed last week. Now she's with the good Lord, and he's going to have the funeral services tomorrow at 9 o'clock visitation at the Forest Park Funeral Home over there on Louisiana Avenue, just behind the new Willis Knighton Rehab. The visitation's going to be there at 9, and then immediately followed also in the chapel at 10 by the funeral.
All right.
And after the funeral, she'll be interred out there at Forest Park East by the mall, and then it's just going to be a beautiful tribute to Miss Margie, and that was his mama.
Well, we will be
life.
sure and keep them in our thoughts and prayers. And Tom, appreciate you calling in.
Did you want to say anything about the legislature, Tom? I know that
yes,
you've.
I do.
Okay.
I'm just all bowed up over this whole thing. What John Bell Edwards and the whole team. I didn't think they were going to do. And my issue is a gasoline tax. If that's the case, there was money that was supposed to be dedicated to all of the infrastructure across the state, and it's been robbed.
Yeah,
so
we've given it to the sheriffs and the state troopers and anybody and everybody, and that's why our infrastructure is in the shape that it's in.
That's exactly right. And if in fact they do this, how are we guaranteed that money will go straight to the roads? I mean, they say it will be dedicated, but I can't trust anybody anymore.
Well, join the club, my friend. Welcome to the great state of Louisiana. Tom Pace, we appreciate you calling in, and our thoughts and prayers go out to the Palmisano family and the loss of their mother.
Well, give out the number again because people want to talk with you.
320-5335.
Area code 318-320-5335. Call from anywhere in the country, and that accent is real. We've got a caller on the line right now. Patrick?
Patrick?
Hey. Yes.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing great. What's on your mind, my friend?
Well, I really wanted to kind of mention this House bill. It's House Bill 562. It's one that I see that John Bell Edwards is actually backing, and it's something I'm going to kind of call as a Netflix tax because it's a expansion of local and state taxes on new products and services such as Netflix. And that really just another example of the legislator kind of finding more ways to get our money, our hard-earned money.
Well, it's and I have not heard about this one. I mean, the commercial activity tax to me, and I will tell you, I don't do business in Louisiana because the cost of doing business in Louisiana is too prohibitive. We have the highest severance tax in the nation. We have one of the highest state income taxes. We have the highest sales tax here in Caddo Parish. We have the highest property taxes here in Caddo Parish. So I don't think that it's a tax problem, but we have to make some tough decisions. Do we want to continue to support what we have, or do we vote more taxes because it doesn't look like anybody's willing to cut the spending part of the equation.
So this is a Netflix
what really
tax.
bothers me. Oh, go ahead.
So it's a Netflix tax. So this is on streaming media. I mean, exactly what is this?
It's an expansion of state and local taxes to streaming services and even cable television.
Well, what
But
about our
also,
show? We stream our show. So would that be taxed as well?
I ain't
Well, if
paying.
people pay to listen, then they would be have that added local tax or state tax.
So
So
here
the
we
cost
go.
of doing business, Mike Woods, it
Just
should be
went up
alarming
again.
to you.
Yeah.
You know, we already have the highest business tax, all kinds of highest everything tax.
I agree. And look, where are we ranked everywhere in the nation? We're ranked
Everywhere in the
50th,
nation, 50th.
Except incarceration. We are number one in incarceration
And that costs
rates.
money, too. Thank you,
Right,
Patrick.
And well, you know, it also covers the digital purchase of books, which can affect students with textbooks.
Oh
It
my
will
gosh!
affect
And my
students with-
wife and
So
all
it's
over her
just
Kindle.
widespread.
Well, no, especially students. I have students still in college, and they buy their textbooks online.
Right.
So, so do you think, Patrick, in your opinion, was this a thoughtful bill? I mean, did the people that put this together, i.e., the governor at all, did they really think through the implications of this, or are they just looking for more ways to tax us?
I think it's just more ways to tax. I mean, last year they slipped in that Amazon tax where they're now taxing the internet sales through Amazon specifically, was mentioned in that bill.
I know. I just got something today, and I got charged sales tax on it. Well, we're coming up on a break. This is Mike Woods. I'm sitting in for C.L. Bryant with Michelle. We will be back after the break with Representative Thomas Carmody.
Broadcasting from the Bayou State and all around the Gulf Coast and streaming nationwide. This is the C.L. Bryant Show.
Welcome back to the C.L. Bryant Show. This is Mike Wood sitting in the studio with Michelle. And Michelle, I believe we have a caller on the phone. Donnie, are you there?
I'm here.
What's going on, my friend?
How are you guys tonight? Appreciate your time tonight.
We're doing great.
Yeah. Well, I just, I live here in Louisiana, and I'm an ex-Texan, but don't ask me why I moved here. I married a beautiful lady here, so there you go.
That's a good reason.
In Texas, real quick, Mike, our government, the state of Texas, meets 45 days every other year, and we have $18 billion surplus, 45 days every other year. Then they go back home to their constituents and face the heat or the music, and I assure you that we do things right over there, and if you ever driven in Texas, the roads are pretty nice.
They're very nice. You're talking to a Texas resident, Donnie.
Yes, but the question I have 4 questions.
Okay.
Number one, and I have a very good friend, Larry Bagley, who's a state representative out of Mansfield, Logansport area.
Good guy.
Well, okay. He tells me that they're not going to raise any more taxes. But the first thing he did, and a bunch of other Republicans, when they convened last year, they voted to raise our sales tax 1%.
And Larry ran saying that he was going to protect higher ed, and at the time that was the only way to protect higher ed.
Now, there's nothing wrong with higher ed, okay, Mike? But what about the working people in the state of Louisiana? Every time you take a penny from any person in this state, whether it's Louisiana or Texas or Michigan or whomever, we lose less freedom. Can you agree with that or not?
I agree with that. That's why I moved out of state.
Well, let's talk about this, Donnie. You specifically asked about that tax that Mike wanted, the gasoline tax that Mike wants to impose upon us. Let's go there.
The question is that I have for anyone in this state, what have we done with the money for the past 30 or 40 years?
We've thrown it away.
Well, now, is that my fault, Mike?
No, it's not.
Fault, Michelle?
No. But when the bridge falls down, who's going to fix it?
Okay.
Well, it's not the point, though.
Whose fault is that?
Because
whose fault is that?
It's those of us who vote. Unfortunately, I don't vote in Louisiana, but we keep electing the same people that keep doing the same things, and we expect different results. I understand where you're coming from, and believe me,
that is insanity.
I agree. That is the very definition of insanity.
Okay. And people that are down in Baton Rouge, it is their responsibility to fix this, Mike, and the people that need to be worrying about that bridge falling need to be the people that were paid. Now, they weren't there 30 years ago and 20 years ago, but they're there
wait a minute.
now.
John O'Leary's been there since
Forever.
1972.
Well, Michelle, one of the things that Donnie pointed out, which is an excellent point, is the fact that the Texas legislature only meets for 45 days. But the other big difference between Louisiana and Texas is that in Louisiana, we collect taxes and send to Baton Rouge that then come back to us. In Texas, it doesn't happen that way. They actually all you have independent school districts. You have taxing authorities locally that know how to best spend the money, and that's why Texas is in the good shape that it's in.
We thank you for your call, Donnie, and thank you for listening.
But the final one little question, real quick.
Okay.
Whether it's Texas, Michigan, California, or Louisiana, why do our politicians spend more money than we have coming in?
It's a good point, and you can't tax your way to prosperity. We all know that.
There you go.
Thank you, Donnie.
Right, thank you. Bye-bye.
You bet. So, we got another caller?
No, we've got Thomas Carmody on the line.
We got my friend
He's
Thomas Carmody.
He's not afraid to talk to us. State Representative Thomas Carmody.
Thomas, how are you, my friend?
I'm well, sir, and yourself.
Well, you're back in the great metropolis of Baton Rouge.
What's the weather like in Shreveport, Mike?
It is. We're supposed to be getting storms tonight. It is hot and muggy.
It is 80 degrees here.
Oh gosh.
Like, yeah.
And storms. I predict storms for the next 20 days down there.
I think it's going to be more like the whole session.
Yeah.
But Mike, really quickly, I'm hoping that you can kind of give me just a moment to tell you about one of the bills that I was bringing, because I think you kind of understand, so I'm going to try and make it as simple as I can.
You bet.
Back when Governor Long was trying to make sure that he had all the political power that he could muster, they ended up slipping into the Louisiana Constitution the Board of Commerce and Industry. And what the Board of Commerce and Industry was basically an appointed board by the governor that would see these different projects around the state that LED maybe had worked with, or that somebody had approached the administration and said, hey, we'd like to build a plant, in this part of the state. Well, Long and his cronies figured that, wow, if we could get the ability into the state constitution to waive the property taxes, to exempt somebody from paying the property taxes,
people would give us money.
Not only would they give you money, then when you needed to seek something in the way of legislative help, then the administration was the place that you went to for what? Capital outlay.
And, of course, they had a tremendous impact on property tax collections. Thomas, we're coming up on a break. We're going to have to hold you through the break.
All right.
But when we come back, we're talking with State Rep Thomas Carmody, who's introduced a bill to amend the Constitution dealing with the Board of Commerce and Industry. This is Mike Wood sitting in for C.L. Bryant. We'll be back in a second. Welcome back to the C.L. Bryant Show. This is Mike Wood sitting in the studio with Michelle, and we have State Representative Thomas Carmody, who is in Baton Rouge solving all of the state's problems.
Introducing the first actual budget cut by a Republican.
Well, that's Mike. Michelle was pointing that out. I did say a mouthful before, but the whole idea here is that you could remove that Board of Commerce and Industry and save the state the per diem that they're paying people to come and their mileage to come to Baton Rouge to basically just do this simple step. Anyway.
Well, and you said to me the other day that this simple step would to empower the local governments, like the parish commissions.
Well, because the one side of it, and that's the way it works down here, there's one side of it that's if you're going to take something out of the Constitution that's instructed in the Constitution, then you have to create a law that's going to direct it to do something else. So there's a companion legislation that sets up the parish authority to make the determination. And the challenge there is that you want your parish authority to be made up of elected officials, because if these people are giving up your property taxes that take care of your schools, take care of the roads and bridges, and law enforcement, I mean, you ought to have the right to vote them out of office by saying you made a deal that was too sweet for us to stomach.
Well, and the idea behind the Board of Commerce and Industry was great in theory, but you're exactly right. It has been abused through the years, and especially I think during the general administration, we may have given away.
We just
gave away everything, and now we have local municipalities and parishes that have to maintain the infrastructure, and they don't have the tax base to do
and
that.
I think you use that as an example.
But you see what happens there is that's how when you go to the fourth floor to the governor's office and you say, hey, I really would like to get a second span built over the red where Jimmy Davis Bridge is, that somebody says, oh, well, if you would like that, then that's capital outlay, and therefore you're asking me for something. I'm going to ask you for it's politics, right?
And that's the conversation we had with a previous caller, Donnie, that said the Texas legislature only meets 45 days out of the year, and I said, yeah, and they also don't send their money to Austin that then has to be in turn sent back to the local municipalities.
Right
well, because you have to have trust. The other day you said to me, Thomas, basically this is where we lure companies from outside, which we all want in Louisiana, to come, say, to Caddo Parish, and build this huge building, but then they want a road there, and there's a cost to that, and Baton Rouge isn't paying for that.
To it, and if you've given away the tax base for that piece of property and you don't have it, then you've got to go with your hat in your hand to the administration
to get the road built.
Something. Right.
So what are you thinking about this bill? I mean, what do you think the atmosphere there is going to be of acceptance? Because we hear that...
I think it's interesting because the school boards around the state, remember, that is the lion's share of the taxes that we pay.
Over half in Caddo Parish goes to the state, goes to the school board.
Right. So they've always said anytime you take a penny away from us, it hurts our ability to do our job. So they're going to be on board. Then you'd have the parish associations who I think would like the ability to be able to do it, but it gets so complicated because the parishes at one point got pretty smart, and they decided that instead of us having this liability, we're going to set up this pseudo entity that's not made up of elected officials but operates as a nonprofit. And I'm not saying that's bad, but you can take a look at the Caddo Parish Industrial Development Board, right? And some of the decisions that were made there, in hindsight, you kind of just scratch your head.
Well, and we've had, especially in our industry in oil and gas, as different parish assessors lost the ability because of Board of Commerce and Industry decisions. They revalued the oil and gas. And so all of a sudden, a lot of my production was no longer economic because my taxes tripled.
So you're just saying keep the oversight local, and make sure that the people that have the oversight, Thomas, about your tax dollars are people that have to answer to you, taxpayer, by your vote.
At the ballot. I just think that's the way to do it. Now, granted, it sets up, and I've had this discussion with our governor. In my opinion, it sets up the potential for people to glad hand somebody, right?
But don't they do that now, except at the governor's level?
That's my point.
I mean, if you're going to say that everybody's dishonest, but the down in Baton Rouge, well, that's not fair to the other local entities in Louisiana.
But I think it's a good bill that I think that even with the governor saying that now he doesn't have any capital outlay money. I mean, we're up against it, right? I mean, he doesn't have a satchel full of cash that he can tell me that I can, finish out I-49 through the center of Shreveport. And so without that ability, then he doesn't have a whole lot of sway when it comes down to seeking a vote in exchange for some capital outlay money.
Well, you've got a lot of nerve introducing a bill that actually makes sense in Baton Rouge, but
Oh, I don't know about that, Mike. I've been read the Riot Act on a couple of my other bills. That's okay. I did want to tell you though that I was really the pre-sessions survey. That man, they came back so fast, and God bless, the majority of them are serious. There's some of them, you get a Don Rickles type comment every now and then.
Well, and what you're
And so
talking
you
about,
have
Thomas, to fill in Mike and everyone else looking at me.
Yes, when I sent out my pre-session survey, I asked
to
5
everybody in his
questions of my
district, and I
constituents.
received one because I'm in his district.
And you did receive one, Michelle.
Yes, I did.
So, and I'm trying to remember, Michelle, how much did you want to pay extra?
I was the Don Rickles. I was the Don Rickles one that you got.
You were the Don Rickles.
so people don't want to pay more taxes?
But how many did you send out approximately?
Say that one more time.
How many
Michelle.
did you send out approximately?
I think, maybe 6,500.
And how many did you get back approximately?
Oh man, they are coming back in droves. I
There you
haven't
go.
counted them all up yet, but I mean, I love reading them because look, people take the time to express themselves. But right now, I can just tell you that the mood, the consensus of the results that I've gotten back, are people are pretty fed up.
Yeah.
And they're tired of feeling like there's so many knocks against us. Our roads are bad. We incarcerate way too many people, right? But John Bell, God bless him, gave what I consider to be a pretty nice speech, but it ran a little long. If I'd have been a speech coach, I'd have cut it down a little bit. But he's not going to get anywhere with what he's proposing. And when I say that, I don't mean to be mean. I understand the man's in a tough spot. We're all in a tough spot.
I'm glad it's not me, and I'm glad it's you down there to solve all these problems, Thomas Carmody. We are going into a break. Buddy, I appreciate your service down there. Straighten them out.
Mike, bless you, Michelle. Thank y'all. Y'all take care.
Thank you, sir. Mike Wood sitting in for C.L. Bryant. We'll be back after the break.
If you had not have fallen, then I would not have found you.
Welcome back to the CL Bryant Show. This is Mike Woods sitting in the studio with Michelle, and CL will be back in the studio tomorrow night, and look forward to.
Nelson, your good friend. And
Yeah.
Aren't you guys the same age?
Just about. I actually do have a good friend, John Butler, who plays a lot with Willie Nelson. So.
And you play the bass.
I play the bass every Sunday, whether I need to or not. Yeah, that's.
Whether anybody wants you to or not
right.
is another story. But
Yeah.
I'm just looking on Twitter about chemical weapons stockpiled in Syria. Ideas people are throwing out there that they'll find somebody to that Putin and the Saudis will find somebody to replace Assad.
Well, and a lot of folks don't realize, and a lot of the controversy, and we talked about Susan Rice earlier. Remember, she was the one who also gave us the explanation on Benghazi.
I know. Well, I'm not going to forget because that's my issue is Benghazi.
And so here is a lady that has lied before and has lied once again, and
lied so many times.
Been caught in the lie this time, even as I said earlier in the show, when the Washington Post gives her 4 Pinocchios, which is the most Pinocchios you can get from the Washington Post. So it's going to be interesting as we go forth. But I'm excited again today, and with our new Supreme Court Justice, it ought to be interesting to see as he actually, a novel idea, interprets the law and doesn't try to write it from the bench. And I know that's why Mike Johnson is such a strong supporter of the new justice. And it's going to be interesting as we go forward, Michelle, to see the president's response. And Tillerson's going to Moscow. And we've got
which was interesting, as you pointed out. This is a man who does business in that country
and has done business for years over there.
Blasted about that when he was, trying to become Secretary of State, and
again,
that's why Putin knows him. He knows Putin, and he knows how to negotiate with him. That doesn't give away our country. It means that we get light years quicker with him because they've worked together before.
And all of the criticism that the president got for appointing these rich people into these cabinet positions, and look so far at the folks and what they're doing. I mean, it makes sense to appoint CEOs to these cabinets because they are, in effect, running large businesses on behalf of the United States
They're
of
like
America.
mini governors, basically decision makers. And, to see him give away his salary. You didn't see that a lot in the mainstream media, but the president gave away his first quarter salary to a veterans organization. So, it's amazing.
It is amazing, and he's for the first time to have an elected official actually do what they say they were going to do. What a novel idea!
But you see the mainstream media just blasting against him all the time
because they don't like him and they don't like what we stand for.
So we just need to be strong, and our listeners need to stand up and
keep telling
stay
the truth.
Informed.
It's been a pleasure. This is Mike Woods sitting in for CL Bryant with Michelle, and I always appreciate the opportunity and appreciate the listening audience. I want to thank the men and women that serve in the armed services. Thank the men and women that also take care of us and fire and police. And as always, thinking of my children, my grandchildren, watch over them and bless each and every one of y'all in the listening audience. Mike Woods signing off for CL Bryant. Thank you.
For those who wear the uniform.